सेम वाइड फ्रेम लावायची का ही थोडी क्लोज चांगली राहते.
As a non-tech person, I would like to understand from you about the mandate of the RBI when it comes to leveraging technology for compliance management solution.
A compliance management system, can it be considered
Correct.
material or not?
On this note,
If there is a multi-tenant system, meaning a vendor is serving multiple regulated entities along with you, how is the vendor preventing exposure of your data to others? To get the maximum juice out of it, you have to bring in your internal compliances related to the core of your business.
hello everyone, welcome back to GRCCast. This is Shruti.
This is Rishi.
And we are very excited to bring you this 5th episode of GRCCast, that is the RBI edition. There has been a gap since our last episode, so our workload has been booming with lots of new projects, exciting clients, which is keeping us on our toes at all times. Let's get started. So the circular issued by RBI on January 31st, 2024, early this year, has stirred up quite a lot of buzz among the financial institutions, because the mandate is that they should implement a technology-based solution to streamline their internal compliance monitoring mechanism. We've been receiving lots of requests for the demo of our GRC tool because the deadline that has been set is June 30th, 2024. It directs most of the kinds of financial institutions like scheduled commercial banks or nbfcs, with certain exceptions, credit information companies or all India financial institutions like Exim, nbfid, etc. It covers most of these entities, and it says that you have to have the system in place, and it also sets out its expectations. I'll just read a few of them. Such a system should be able to provide communication and collaboration among all the stakeholders. Then it should have processes for identifying, assessing, monitoring, and managing compliance requirements.
Right.
Then it should be able to escalate the issues of non-compliances. It should be able to give a unified dashboard to senior management on the compliance position of the entire regulated entity.
Right.
It should require recording of approval of competent authority in case of deviations or delay in compliance submission. So all these requirements have been set out in this 1.5 page circular of RBI.
Right.
And the very discussion that we were having, from which this entire topic of the podcast emerged, where we realized that this circular is just not it.
Absolutely.
So as a non-tech person, I would like to understand from you a bit more about the mandate of the RBI. The reference that I am going to pick up is of the master direction that RBI had come up with last year, which talks about outsourcing of IT services. That details out a lot of parameters, lots of provisions which vendors should be able to comply with. I think prima facie, the applicability again includes the whole list of the scheduled commercial banks, NBFCs, credit information companies, etc.
Right.
But from the tech point of view,
Right.
the applicability is a bit complex.
Right.
Because it talks about the concept of materiality. As a non-tech person, I would like to understand from you how you look at the materiality aspect from the tech point of view.
Correct. So RBI clearly defines materiality. The first criteria is if the services are core to your business. If the vendor operations hamper and it leads to some disruption in your services, it constitutes as material outsourcing. Another criteria is if some customer data, some confidential or sensitive information is going into the tool which is being outsourced, then that also constitutes as material outsourcing. Whether a compliance management system can be considered
Correct.
material or not. It's a gray area. If you are employing a compliance management system at a very surface level without offloading any of the core compliance work to them or any of the core customer data related compliance work to that system, then yes, it is non-material. But then again, it is of limited use. To get the maximum juice out of it, you have to bring in your internal compliances related to the core of your business. So eventually, it will become a material outsourcing type of engagement with your vendor.
So you mean it clearly depends on the depth of the implementation of that particular compliance management system, and therefore it may vary from RE to RE.
Organizations can start with a surface level approach. As their maturity increases, they should go deeper.
Again, if I have to draw the reference of the recent January circular, the kind of expectations that the circular sets out are such that it's going to be a very, very detailed and in-depth implementation, and then it may fall under the materiality aspect. We would definitely like to understand from you more about the master direction. From the tech point of view, what kind of mandate it sets out, what kind of due diligence it requires you to have.
You need to have a governance structure in place. So RBI specifies 3 roles here. First is the role of the board. Second is the role of the senior management and the IT function. The responsibilities of board are mainly related to framework establishment. The board need not get into even policy formulation. They just need to set up a framework of creating policies around administration, approvals, and around processes. Then comes the responsibility of senior management. They actually should indulge in policy formation, selection of vendor, what should be the criteria, what should be the service level expectations, what should be the uptimes, expected response time, the usability levels, the training required, and everything from a risk management point of view. Then there are things like formulating policies for audit and quality control, and also capacity building, which is essentially constituting a good team. Then comes the part of the IT function, which is just execution of the policies, documentation, monitoring, and surveillance of the work which is being done by the vendor. And lastly, basically interfacing for everything.
It's an investment from the financial
Correct.
institution's point of view.
Correct.
And because it's also a compliance to the RBI's mandate, they have to make sure that everything is properly adhered to and done with, right? And the due diligence becomes very important, and I think the master direction also talks about the detailed due diligence.
Yes.
But from the tech point of view,
Correct.
what all aspects should be included in such a due diligence, if you could throw some light on that?
Even the due diligence needs to be looked from a risk management point of view. Whenever a regulated entity engages any vendor, the first major risk is the business risk. First is capability assessment, and second is the reliability. Capability assessment, basically, you need to check the past experience of the vendors. If the vendor is a new vendor, check the past experience of the management team or the co-founders or the core team. Get clear feedback from the market, appoint a technology auditor or an assessor, and get your own independent assessment done. And then move to the reliability. Promise of a solution and delivering the solution for months, for years altogether are completely 2 different ballgames. Assessing the quality of service, business continuity. If say tomorrow you wish to change a vendor, or if say you want to move the operations in-house, does the vendor which you are assessing have the capability of smoothing out these transfers?
Correct.
It is also important, considering the risks involved, to have a detailed technical due diligence. Right? You need to have a design level assessment, which includes assessing whether the vendor has employed any rigorous data classification mechanisms. Data is of 4 types: public data, internal data, confidential data, and sensitive data. And each data needs to be treated and handled differently. Is encryption there both at the database level and at the object level? What about the network? Is it a cloud-based solution? Is it an on-prem solution? If there is a multi-tenant system, meaning a vendor is serving multiple regulated entities along with you, how is the vendor preventing exposure of your data to others? Code level controls. You may not review the source code, but you can sort of gauge the philosophy of how software development process there is done. How is the code structure, like, small things like how are environmental variables being handled? Are unit tests there? What is the code coverage? What is the testing methodology? To what level they have employed automation in their testing? So things like that, which can give you a good idea about the maturity of the software development process. Then we come to the operational assessment part. How is the release management? Before releasing, what are the controls that are used for gatekeeping? Is the methodology in alignment with the team size? If the team is very small and if they have an extremely elaborate methodology, it's not going to work out. On the other hand, if the team is too big and if they have an extremely lean methodology, then also it's not going to work out. You also need to assess their level of customer support, how soon they fix issues, are they responsive enough, are the customer success representative mature enough to understand practical level issues. You could also look at their future pipeline of features that will show the vision of the tool. Technology is never stagnant. You want to engage with a vendor whose solution is continuously being improved. Also from a point of view where, how the upcoming features are going to impact the current feature. So this level of practical due diligence, if you do, will paint a realistic picture of the risks which you are embracing.
So sure, this due diligence will definitely help with risk minimization, but in spite of that, there could still be some inherent risks. And also tell us, How do you mitigate them?
First is the risks related to data. Second is the risks related to services. And thirdly, the risk related to exiting the vendor engagement. So as far as data is concerned, the first risk is basically loss of data. Loss of data can happen when infrastructure is not reliable. It doesn't have any backup and recovery mechanism. Even if the vendor is providing you a backup and recovery mechanism, how quickly can you recover? If the recovery of data is going to take months, practically service will remain disrupted. Secondly, theft of data. So theft of data either can happen because of some malpractice at RE's end or vendors end. You can have legal protections for that. But it can also happen because of, say, cyber incident. RBI clearly mandates that any cyber incident should be communicated to RBI within 6 hours of its occurrence.
And is that practically possible?
If the vendor is knowledgeable and mature enough, it is possible. It needs to be detected at the vendor level, then it needs to be communicated to the RE, then the RE needs to communicate that to RBI all within 6 hours.
Right.
Encryption is the only way you can safeguard. People use certain mechanisms for performance, as in people use caching. You need to have a sweet spot between achieving performance and security. Then the third risk with respect to data is the corruption of data. So this is something which typically happens in a multi-tenant system when one vendor is servicing multiple regulated entities. The surest way to do that is a mechanism which we call as bring your own key. You tell the vendor, okay, this is my key, encrypt all my data with this key. So that you are absolutely sure that whatever data is residing at the vendor is encrypted with your key, which is in your control. Then when we talk of service related risks, of course, the first risk is loss of service. Loss of service typically happens when there is any cyber incident. Before engaging with the vendor, have a detailed chat with the vendor with respect to the controls they have for analyzing vulnerabilities. The second risk is disruption in service, intermittent loss in service, which can mainly happen if the infrastructure is not good enough, if the software architecture is not good enough, it cannot withstand variations in traffic. The release management is also not streamlined. Typically for vendors where release management is not streamlined, there are a lot of downtimes. And last is basically reduction in quality. As the software grows bigger in features, it is more difficult to manage. Its performance becomes slower, usability reduces, unless there is this thing called technical debt, which is managed nicely. Ensure that you are engaging with a vendor who is aware about all these things. When newer features are being added, they don't hamper the performance and usability of the previous features, and at the same time, the scalability and maintainability of the overall solution is retained. Then we come to exit related risks. There are 3 exit scenarios. One is when you want to change the vendor in the future. Second is when you want to move the operations in-house. Thirdly, when you want to change from a multi-tenant system to a single-tenant system. So in the scenario of change of vendor, it is absolutely essential that the vendor demonstrates to you they have the ability to isolate your data, all the reports, all the documents, information about your employees, about your customers, onboarding related information. You should be able to get from their system within, say, hours. That level of maturity you will have to expect if you want to have a smooth transition. Whatever data dump you get, you have to ensure beforehand that the new vendor is able to understand that data dump and import it into that system. When moving from a multi-tenant system to a single-tenant system, if probably regulations of RBI get even more complex, so these scenarios may arise. You need to engage with your vendor beforehand, get their assurance that they will be able to migrate you to a single tenant system in the future. If you want to move your operations in-house, you need to have all the requisite skill sets in-house. It is going to bump up your investment, and retaining top quality talent is going to be crucial.
So we looked at the governance framework,
Yeah.
we looked at the due diligence, and we also looked at the risk mitigation.
Correct.
If a robust compliance management system has to be in place,
Yes.
then it is highly likely that it will fall under the materiality aspect, and therefore I think all the vendors who are providing these services, as well as all the financial institutions to whom this circular is applicable,
Right.
have to look into this master direction as well, and the circular
Yes.
cannot be read in isolation.
Absolutely.
So this is a pretty challenging yet forward-looking phase for the financial institutions, but it is definitely going to help them in the long run, because it is going to get them implement a very, very robust compliance management solution in place. So do share your views and stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.